Hey, keep fighting the good fight out there, right? The esports holy war has been won, so maybe the Disney Plus holy war can be won too against those fans.
Nerd Legion is back for another week of Marvel. This is a glorious week of Marvel, though. Doa, did we finally get
Well,
an entirely good show?
it's a week with glorious purpose. That's for sure. We know that much at least with Loki season 2. But I'm not sure. Just to give you my general idea right from the beginning, I'm not sure if this is a good show or not. I think there are definitely good things about it, but I'm not convinced it's actually like a fully good show. But the fact that like I've been thinking about it a lot since watching the finale, it probably pushes it into the good show range, but I don't know. I don't know. My mind is not made up yet on it. Where are you at on it?
Well, I think that it's definitely in contention for the best show we've actually discussed here on Nerd Legion. It didn't really disappoint me at any point in time. The acting remained very good throughout.
Okay.
The characters are really fun. I like the direction that they pushed the narrative. I thought it was really creative, the way they used the multiverse and kind of the different timelines and the way they resolved everything at the end of the show. I really enjoyed the time travel back to the Chicago World's Fair in 1893, which is a very famous event in American history. And, I think probably a lot of you like me have read The Devil in the White City. And so it was fun it was really impressive, I think, to see that realized on screen. So I think there was a lot.
Amazing in the show.
Yeah, the sets were incredible.
That is something that like I felt like every scene I was saying that to myself, where I'm like, the sets are incredible in this show. Like the locations they found, the stuff they definitely built, lots of big sets it feels like, and just lots of very, very detailed sets. So if anything, yeah, I'd love the sets in the show.
Visually, it just remains spectacular, and I totally didn't expect them to take the additional expense of trying to rebuild like 1893 Chicago, in addition to all of the spectacular sets that they built for the TVA. I think the level of care and design that went into this show was immense, and it really came off very well.
I love the entire look of it, the very sort of like retro 1950s thing, but done in sort of like a dingy way. It was a bit Fallout-esque if you're familiar with that video game series, but a little bit cleaner.
It was very Wes Anderson, as we said previously. It's very Wes Anderson in the way that it looks and the colors.
But it worked so well. And I mean, just the way they shot things, lots of slow zooms on things, lots of slow pans. It was shot in a way that that television, especially Marvel television, isn't really shot. So I appreciated that. I had one. I'll start off with this. The one thing with the props and the sets, they were all amazing, except that if you are a Warhammer Age of Sigmar player, their little, I forget what the name of the device was, but their little orb thing at the end of the gangplank that he put the thing that's supposed to fix the temporal loom is, it is no doubt a piece from a Caradron Overlord's blimp or Zeppelin kind of thing. I've got a couple of them right here, but if you notice, a very similar look to things in the TVA here.
It's actually true.
It's not this exact one, but I'm not sure which model it is. If maybe it's from an Ironclad or from one of the other ones. But as you can see, there's this, and then I've got this unpainted one here. That's a different one, but looks very familiar, doesn't it? Looks like something you could put a key in and fix a temporal loom with, doesn't it? So I saw that. I saw this, and I'm like, oh, I know exactly what that is. That's from one of those Warhammer models. So I mean, props to the prop people, because obviously they stuck a couple little doodads on it and stuff like that. They didn't just straight up, I don't think, take it and then stick it on the top of this other model, but it did make me laugh to see that on there. But hey, I mean, the look of the Caradron Overlords, they're kind of these spacefaring dwarves in the Warhammer Age of Sigmar universe. The aesthetic for it really does fit perfectly into the stuff we saw in the TVA. So I wanted to show that, because that was fun to see. A little bit of Warhammer deep lore for you there. But aside from that, I mean, and maybe even including that, all the sets and everything was awesome. So yeah, that aspect of the show I totally loved, for sure.
Yeah, and at least, like I said, it didn't feel disappointing at the end. I like the resolution that they
Yeah.
had. I think it does do a good job of setting up, the future kind of Kang the Conqueror arc that we know Marvel's going for over the next,
Mhm.
3-4 years, right? Because allegedly, like a lot of those Avengers movies with Kang the Conqueror are going to be coming out 2025, 2026.
Yeah.
Clearly, and we'll get to it, the Jonathan Majors question is looming in the air. Uh,
Yeah.
because I believe he's supposed to begin his trial soon, and they haven't made
Well,
any announcements about that. But
I was reading up on that a little bit because I hadn't heard about that until you mentioned it. And I take this all with a grain of salt because who knows what happens in Hollywood trials, right? You can never, who even knows what information is true and what is less than true. But I had read somewhere that many of the charges were going to be dropped, and the person that accused him was now being arrested for assault and things against him. So who knows what's going to happen with that? Regardless, if it would cause him to be unable to continue to be Kang, that would be unfortunate because he is great in that role. I think Kang might be my favorite Marvel villain yet. And Thanos was okay, but like just the whole idea behind Kang, that it's like this human being who in the 31st century, if you go back to the comics or whatever it is, he becomes aware of the multiverse, and then basically the super smart guy that, then all the versions of him start contacting each other and sharing technology with each other, because initially they're trying to better each of their timelines, but then it kind of starts getting out of control. And so one of them decides that he just needs to prevent this multiversal war by taking out all the other Kangs and conquering as much of the multiverse as he possibly can to prevent this big war between himself, essentially.
I
And
think it's an
that's,
amazing idea.
it's a great storyline, yeah, and so that's where He Who Remains comes from. That's where, the TVA comes from. Is the Kang that eventually does sort of come out on top and sort of is pruning all the other timelines to prevent other versions of himself. If you watch Ant-Man and Wasp: Quantumania, that was our first introduction to Kang, and that was the original Conqueror who tried to conquer a bunch, and then he was exiled by the Council of Kangs, all the other Kangs to the quantum realm, and they even referenced that at the end of Loki too.
Yep.
They mentioned that there was a variant of He Who Remains that was dealt with on Earth 616, which is our Earth.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I thought the way it tied in was particularly good, and I mean honestly, like it. We'll see what happens with Jonathan Majors, and I think that I am glad, even if he did do the things that he's been accused of, that Marvel and Disney have kind of taken a step back from making decisions or public statements about this so far, just
yeah,
because I think that it's what people should have learned, and especially after the pulling Johnny Depp from the Harry Potter sequels, before the everything came out, and kind of it had run its course in terms of actual legal proceedings, as we saw in the trial that happened between him and Amber Heard. That there was a lot more to that story, and kind of the knee-jerk reaction was perhaps not the right one. Like, you can come down whatever way you want on the Johnny Depp Amber Heard thing, but it's
you
I
could
will
just not
say,
like either of them too.
yeah,
That's totally
it's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that it's a good thing that some of these Hollywood studios are waiting for more information to come out before pulling people from these films, because it turns out oftentimes that there's a lot more to the story if you let it develop, right? And so
I
in terms
mean,
of and there literally is a trial coming up, I think, with Jonathan Majors. Like I said, we'll see if the charges are dropped or not. But what I will say is, taking away the real life stuff, Jonathan Majors is fucking amazing in this show.
yeah,
He is he is a shockingly good actor, like shockingly good. The difference you see between He Who Remains and Victor Timely is
hmm
really cool to see him playing these two characters. And he also pulls off something that is one of the hardest things to do as an actor, which is when you play two different characters and you actually do an impersonation of one of your other characters as a character. So when he's playing He Who Remains, he starts doing an impersonation of Victor Timely. And why I say that's so hard is because typically you just become that other character, right? When you're trying to do because you're already pretending to be another character. So what happens is you just flip into that character. But what he does in this is that he mocks the stutter that he has as Victor Timely, but he does it in a different way than Victor Timely. And then he mocks the voice of Victor Timely, but he still does it as if he's He Who Remains. So it's an imperfect, impersonation. And it sounds weird, but that is just one of those things that actors really struggle with a lot of the time. And you can see this. There's a very famous clip of Mel Blanc doing this when he's doing Looney Tunes, right? And it's Bugs Bunny impersonating Elmer Fudd, and then Elmer Fudd impersonating Bugs Bunny, and they're different from each other. And this is often seen by other voice actors and actors as like an incredible piece of acting because he makes them different, right? So yeah, it's very fun to see this.
Tell me, how is Victor Timely?
Of course you know about him.
Wait, don't tell me. You're having some problems with the temporal loom.
Yeah. I mean, he was great, and I mean, you can definitely understand why Disney would want to be a little bit slow to pull the trigger on removing someone like that who's supposed to be like your major villain in who knows how many film and television things for the next couple of years, right? But at least for our purposes of reviewing Loki, it's our job to sort of separate the art from the artist, and just look at his performance and say, we'll wait and see with what happens with everything else too, I think that's important to do sometimes too. When you're critiquing a piece of art, you have to sort of like take the human element out sometimes and look at this for what it is performance wise.
Right. Sorry. It's Mel Blanc doing Daffy Duck impersonating Bugs Bunny. It's not Elmer Fudd. They're trying to confuse Elmer Fudd.
There was an Elmer Fudd one too.
Elmer Fudd is in the scene,
he's involved.
but they're trying to pretend that they're the other ones while he's hunting them. So anyway, you can go watch it. There is a clip, I think, of Hank Azaria, who also is a very famous voice actor in his own right, who is discussing how difficult this is to do as a voice actor. But I was just very impressed by Jonathan Majors like pulling this off so seamlessly. Mm-hmm. And especially like you just need a mega actor in this role because he's going to be a million versions of himself, and you can replace him, right? And maybe you replace him with a variety of different actors, like we talked about this last time. Maybe you pull a kind of Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, where when Heath Ledger died in the filming of that movie, he got replaced by 3 different actors in dream sequences. But it does seem like, surely Jonathan Majors doesn't deserve to be in this if he is guilty of what he's accused of. But at the same time, it would be a shame not to have him because he is so good, right? He is so good.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, if you have you watched Ant-Man and Wasp: Quantumania? I would expect you probably haven't. Yeah, I was going to say, but there's a post-credit scene where there's 3 versions of Kang all having a conversation, and each one of them is unique in their own kind of thing. And that's, when you see that, you're like, okay, so this thing could work, because you don't want to get to the situation where you've got like the million Agent Smiths in the Matrix trilogy, and they're all the same, and they all look like Play-Doh because they're all bad CG. But it is actual replicas of the same character, so sure, you can kind of like accept that they're going to be more samey, but like it's just not as much fun to watch. So I'm glad that when I heard what Kang was, and I understood a little bit more of the character, because I'm not like a huge comic book person, so I didn't know much about his character before this stuff started. I was worried that we'd be getting like the same performance in different costumes and all that, but yeah, so far it's been great. So hopefully we get to enjoy more of that performance. We'll wait and see, I guess.
Yeah. Regardless, I mean, the other performances in the show continued to be super good, and I think that's one of the core aspects that I enjoyed most about this. Is just Tom Hiddleston continues to probably be the best actor in a major character within the Marvel universe. You get to see that over and over and over again in this show. Owen Wilson and Ke Huy Quan are also continue to be really good, and that really forms kind of the emotional core of this show, and the banter continues. Like it really, the actors play off each other extremely well, and I think all of the main characters are very well defined and very intriguing and cleverly written.
I think the one character that I didn't like as much was actually Sylvie, because I felt like she felt a little bit one-dimensional compared to the other characters in the show for me, where she was like just out for vengeance. There were a couple moments where I did like that she went and worked at McDonald's because she just wanted a different experience, right? Like I like things like that, but I feel like we didn't get enough of the depth that that character could have had. And you could argue that a lot of that happened in season one, but even in season one, she seemed kind of, hell bent on vengeance, and that was her character, and that was, pretty much all we got. So I feel like that was a character that was a little bit underserved in season two as well. That she would just kind of show up to be sort of like a plot device off and on, and be like, "Oh, I'm going to kill this person. No, please don't kill this person." Okay, so I didn't enjoy that aspect of her character as much. But the other three you mentioned, yeah, they really were, I think, the core of the show, whether they were intended to be or not. And, that worked very well. Owen Wilson was great. That was
Owen
the
Wilson's
best,
super
that's the
good.
best Owen Wilson performance we've ever gotten. And I know a lot of people are going to be mad at me for saying that because of, Wes Anderson stuff, but I think
he's pretty good in the Wes Anderson movies. But yeah.
Of course he's good in the Wes Anderson movies, but I liked him in Loki season 2 and season 1, honestly, the best. And that's even, with Zoolander being one of my favorite films. So I'll say that.
No, there's no comfort. You just choose your burden.
Yeah, I think it was really good casting, and he absolutely kind of nails the role, especially when we get to see him in his like suburban dad jet ski huckster, the version of Mobius, that obviously, like, you understand why he would rather be Mobius than that guy. And I think it's intriguing to see the pull, because obviously he still loves his kids, but the struggle of being this single dad and having this really quite lame job is in direct opposition to the competence that he exudes in his role at the TVA, and like how much kind of authority he has and importance he has in that position. So what I liked is they really set up this great tension between the importance of him being with his family, like his family obligations, but also kind of his obligations to the fabric of the universe. And which one should he trade it for? And they left it ambiguous at the end of the show, right? He's standing there observing the house of his actual like real life in the universe that he's supposed to inhabit. And you don't know which way he's going to go, because both of these things are so important, but he can't have both of them at the same time. And I love that setup with him. And you could really feel that dilemma in his character. And I think it was played out very well by Owen Wilson.
There's a very, very like bittersweet feeling to the end of the series in general. And a lot of that, was his character too, where it's like, there's the whole phrase that, you can never go home, right? Which means, if you go back to a place you lived and you remembered fondly before, it's just never going to be the same. You can never quite recapture, what was so magical about it for you at the time, because time moves on, which is a big, point of this show, which is funny because everyone's jumping around through time. And yet there is this sort of theme of like, things are going to progress, whether you like it or not, right? And so I think that's part of it, where he knows, he loves his kids and all that kind of stuff. He kind of wants that life, but at the same time, if he took that life, you can tell that he would never truly, he'll never really be that person again.
He's never going to be satisfied with that existence. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I like that. I do like that they leave it ambiguous a little bit. Man, I loved Loki's character arc in this, because it's such a great, like, if you think about where Loki came into the MCU at the beginning, the trickster god, the big bad of Avengers season 1, essentially, that leading all the way through Infinity War and all that, the other things he was in, the other Thor movies, and just his journey of this like obsession, his glorious purpose, he keeps saying, right? Where he feels like he was born to rule and all that. And then kind of by the end of the show, his realization that ruling means serving, not, being served. And so finally accepting, what being a ruler really is, and the responsibility of that. So there's a lot more to say about that, but just, on broad strokes, what a great character arc for that character.
I mean, especially if in the context of the broader MCU as well, because the first Avengers movie was dealing with Loki as kind of a petty villain. And then we get to see, and we've talked about how Loki in Norse mythology, it's very true to the source material in Norse mythology, where sometimes he's extremely helpful, sometimes he's just a selfish piece of shit, and like they have to deal with him. And there's really big tie-ins at the end of this show to Norse mythology as well. But you get to see him, sometimes he's like out there being a menace and trying to invade Earth with a bunch of aliens. Sometimes he's actually being helpful. Sometimes he's like just randomly stealing the Tesseract and disappearing, right? And I like the point you made, because it really feels like you really see character development here, because before, many times he is extremely self-serving. He's extremely petty. He's actively jealous of Thor and Odin and the other Norse gods, and trying to, he feels really insecure, right, about his position. And in this show, he actually goes to great lengths to personally sacrifice himself for the friends, people like Mobius, the friends and Ouroboros, the friends that he's made as part of his journey on this show. And he accepts that he can't just do the selfish thing. There is no easy way out of this. And he spends literally centuries traveling back in time trying to solve this problem, which was a brilliant end to the show, I think, where, there is no easy way out, right? And he tries so hard to fix this loom, learning all about physics. And there are some very funny lines in here where at the end he's like, well, how long would it take for me to learn this so I can accelerate this process so that we can get to the loom in time? And, Ouroboros just says, oh, it'll take you centuries to learn this. It's just like, okay. And it says centuries later, which is very funny, right? It's very funny.
I mean, I really, really, really had to know. How long would it take?
Decades.
Centuries.
And I think the pacing of the last episode is brilliant too, because it really moves along and you get a sense of what Loki's doing, but it doesn't drag at all, right? And so he's just trying to prevent the entire universe from unraveling, and he realizes that the loom is actually unfixable at the end. So he went through all of that centuries of learning about physics and science for nothing, basically. And then he actually just has to, he doesn't want to kill Sylvie. So he lets Sylvie kill He Who Remains, and then he himself takes on the burden of managing the timelines, and that's where we end the show. So I really loved the ending to this. I thought it was great, and I thought, to your point, that it really shows immense character development from Loki, and he has become, I think, by far the most interesting character in the MCU, and the most transformed character.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Most transformed. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's no other character that I can think of in the MCU has gone through like such distinct character growth over the course of, X number of movies and shows. And it's neat to know that he's such a core component of the MCU now, where it's like he's literally the person holding like time together, and you sort of see like Yggdrasil, the world tree, as it were, in Norse mythology form, kind of around him at the end, which kind of makes Norse mythology the prominent mythology in the MCU, apparently, which it kind of always was. But
it always was.
We met. Yeah, but we went to like we met Zeus and stuff like that. Russell Crowe plays Zeus in Thor: Love and Thunder and all that. So like we know there's other gods from other mythologies out there. Moon Knight has a lot of Egyptian mythology and all that. But hey, I mean, we got the world tree, right? And literally every single timeline is connected to it, which in Norse mythology, the world tree was what connected all the 9 realms, right?
Yes.
But now it's kind of connecting all the timelines. So it's sort of a take on that mythological idea.
I really loved the way they did it visually too, because they took all the strands from the loom and then flipped it 90 degrees so it became a tree. So they were really thinking about this from the beginning. Obviously, they turned everything green, which is not only Loki's color, but the color of the foliage on the tree. And Yggdrasil, as you say, is the world tree that connects all of the 9 realms of Norse mythology. So Midgard is the human realm that people live in. But there's another deeper layer to this as well when it comes to Loki, which is that in Norse mythology, Loki is famously imprisoned until Ragnarok. So a lot of the Loki stories that you hear happen before his imprisonment. He is then tied down, and they put a venomous serpent above him that drips poison on him.
Oh yeah,
and his
that's
wife
right.
catches the poison in a bowl, and every time she has to go empty the bowl, the poison drips on him, and he like writhes in. He's actually, I think, he's imprisoned with the entrails of one of his kids who was killed. It's very grim, like most Norse mythology.
Yeah,
and
Norse
every time
mythology is pretty rough.
yeah. Anytime the poison like drips on him, he writhes, and then that's what causes earthquakes. So that's their explanation for earthquakes. And then she returns and catches the poison in the bowl again. And the idea is that he is going to be imprisoned until the end of the world. So what they've set up here is it's not the same. He's not being tortured. He hasn't been imprisoned by somebody else, but he is basically bound into this position until, I assume this is where we're going with this. I assume this is foreshadowing of the Kang the Conqueror arc, is that he's going to be imprisoned there until the Kang the Conqueror multi-versal war, which is going to be, Ragnarok, basically, if that makes sense.
Although technically Ragnarok has already happened in the MCU.
Yeah.
Thor, what was it?
Thor Ragnarok.
Thor Ragnarok. Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, Thor Ragnarok, where Asgard was destroyed. And I mean, but this could be
this is more metaphorical.
Metaphorical, right? Sure, a larger, more ephemeral Ragnarok. Right.
It's like even bigger than Ragnarok though, because that was the destruction of Valhalla in one timeline, whereas the implication of this is that this is the war to end all wars across every single timeline, right? So I think it is, in spirit, it's Ragnarok, right? So I assume that they're setting up this imagery and these illusions now to say that he is going to be stuck in this position until the multiversal war starts and resolves itself, which it totally makes sense given what we know about Kang the Conqueror and what is going to be obviously coming up, right? So it's not just the Yggdrasil thing. I think it ties more deeply to the themes of Loki's imprisonment within Norse mythology and when he is released from that bondage.
There's a interesting. I am kind of curious how they're going to work this into the talk of like Yggdrasil that's already existed in the MCU, where Thor explains it in Thor 1, I think it is, and he explains there's a place that connects the 9 realms specifically, which is like the dwarf realm. There's the elves and all that kind of stuff, and then Thor 2 does deal with like elves, so that we know like those other levels of realms exist. And then apparently, I haven't seen it yet, but apparently across the Spider-Verse, there's a moment where they're explaining like different things about the multiverse, and one of them says like the multiverse is described as a tree and other Marvel properties. Apparently, they say that in the movie. I guess I need to watch.
I've seen it. It's a good movie. I don't recall that specific moment from it. But yeah, I have seen that one.
All right. So there's other MCU related things, but I mean, it's interesting because we're getting to the point where like the movies and the shows together are becoming as interconnected and complex as the comics, were. And so that's a whole conversation in itself. And we've kind of touched on this a little bit in the past, where one of the things that's hard about getting into comic books is that there's decades and decades of history. It's really, really difficult to catch up with all the different storylines to understand everything that's happening. And I feel like trying to divide the MCU into eras, which they're doing, is a good idea. That helps compartmentalize a little bit, but we are still getting to the point where there's going to be a lot of lost impact on things, because we have had an MCU that's been around for well over a decade at this point, and there is a lot of stuff that probably newer fans probably haven't seen. So I wonder how that's going to be handled going forward. How much burden of information there is going to be. I know they're probably doing everything they can to avoid it, but you can only do so much after this much content,
Yeah, it's also, like we've said, the movies need to be able to stand alone and make sense. And
sure.
I'm intrigued to see how they do that with the context from this show, because so much of this informs the backstory of Kang that I wonder if they're going to have to explain it, or they have other creative narrative devices in order to bring the audience into the knowledge of what's going on, because it's very important. I assume it's going to be very important that Loki is in the current position that he's in. And you have to summarize that very quickly for an audience about why all of a sudden he is a core figure holding the timelines together for people who haven't necessarily seen this show, because there's not going to be any avoiding this in the future films. Like it is going to be a part of it 100%.
You know what I'm wondering about? This is a little bit off topic, but what about the Skrulls? Do we care about the Skrulls anymore?
I fucking
do
hate
we have to
Secret
think about
Invasion.
the Skrulls anymore? I thought the Skrulls were going to be like a major part of the MCU going forward. We got Secret Invasion, which was terrible, and then like I know the Marvels, that's a new one that just came out, right?
Yeah,
which has Captain Marvel and the character, I can't remember her name, that was established in WandaVision. My gosh, why am I forgetting? But she's got other light powers, and then Miss Marvel, right, who is the high schooler in the Disney Plus show that I've not watched. But I wonder how that's going to connect to everything else that's kind of happening, because to a certain extent, it almost seems like that's off in its own little realm, so to speak, in Marvel. But they're trying to keep everything all interconnected. But
it is a hot mess, though. It is a hot mess.
That makes me worried. I've heard it's not doing great, but you never know. I don't go by reviews. I just see it, and if it's good, it's good. If it's not, it's not. But I'm still so disappointed about Secret Invasion.
It was terrible. At least we got a good show. It's also just interesting to see the wildly different qualities between these two shows. Because Loki was, I thought, quite good and really made the most of it, and Secret Invasion was just a complete steaming pile of shit.
It felt cheap, right? It felt cheap for most of it.
Yeah, this show seems like so expensive, so on point. And we know Secret Invasion cost a ton of money to make, but you just didn't feel the quality at any point in time. Like even the CGI at the end looked cheap, like the stupid arm thing.
The special effects were woven into Loki, no pun intended with the loom thing, much better, I think, than in Secret Invasion. Where it's, and I mean, so Loki does have the advantage where you're in a lot of fantastic locations to begin with, so that kind of stuff doesn't look as out of place as it would in Secret Invasion, where you're inserting this very unrealistic thing into a realistic setting. So sure, they do have the extra challenge special effects wise there, but yeah, it did just, the CG just looked worse in that show for whatever reason. But everything in Loki looked quite good. Even the effect of like time unraveling when people were like unraveled by the radiation and all that. That was a creepy look, which I enjoyed. I like creepy things like that, and it's a good way to do it, where you can make people explode, but not in a way that gets you pulled off of Disney Plus. So
it looked
well done there. Yeah.
It looked great. It felt just as good as the snap moment from Thanos in terms of its impact, but they didn't do it visually in the same way, right? It wasn't the dust. It was more the kind of unraveling, like almost like their DNA was unraveling and like coming out in long strands. And they even made it fucking funny, DoA. The fact that we just saw Victor Timely just exploding over and over and over again, and then Loki getting increasingly frustrated by it was hilarious. They're very humorous. There's like darkly humorous moments in this show that I thought they made me chuckle, and
it's just the Loki character very well.
The tone of this show and the pacing are just so on point, right? It moves along. You get the story and the emotional resonance of this in only 6 episodes, right? And a lot happens. And they don't spend a lot of time like dwelling on explaining things over and over to you again. They're happy just to slap a centuries later in there and you understand, what's been happening. And I think it's a real credit because if anything, one of our complaints, DoA, has been that shows are too pedantic or they pretend the audience is stupid. And that's not something this show does. Like, it pretends that you're paying attention. It knows you're paying attention, and it allows you to make the connections yourself without shoving it down your throat.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a show that demands you kind of follow along, and it's, which makes it probably less palatable to a lot of Marvel fans that are more interested in just kind of like the big punchy stuff, but not to demean most Marvel fans, but I know people who've watched Loki season 2 and they're like, oh, it's just too complicated. And I'm like, really? Like, this is why we can't have nice things, you know?
It's like all those Star Wars fans on TikTok, by the way, Doa.
Lightsabers.
Have you seen the complaints on TikTok, on our TikTok, when we talk about Andor and people just say Andor's boring?
Yeah.
Which is definitely like, it's definitely not boring. It is a very interesting show.
Reading comments on our TikToks though for the show is one of my favorite pastimes though. I love it. They hate us so much.
Hey, some of the people understand, and they go. Like, we've got some warriors like battling those people in there. It's very funny.
Hey, keep fighting the good fight out there, right? You know, the esports holy war has been won, so you know maybe the Disney Plus holy war can be won too against those fans. But like it is funny because you know I found out that the one cardinal sin one can commit is not having watched all of Rebels. That's what I've learned. But I digress. Back to Loki. So when I was thinking about, you know, do I like the show or not? I'm definitely in the camp of liking the show, but there are a few things that stood out to me that I didn't enjoy as much. One of them was the Miss Minutes kind of thing, because I will say she was integrated into the show visually perfectly.
Amazing.
Like that best animated character in a live action show, a cartoon looking animated character in a live action show ever, in my opinion. Just so
really, Who Framed Roger Rabbit's pretty great, but okay.
Yeah, but it didn't. This is where it looked so seamless. Like the character looked like it was in the environment. It looked like it was really, you know, interacting with the characters. Like there's a level of realism with Miss Minutes that
how dare you do the original Space Jam, you know, like that though.
You know, I love me the original Space Jam. That's a sentence that I just said. But it's Miss Minutes was great. The thing I didn't like with Miss Minutes is that I wasn't sure how much I should care about this character, because on the one hand she seems like kind of an interesting sidekick character, kind of a mysterious sort of like entity, which is neat, but then they had sort of this like weird like little very short-lived romantic angle with her and Victor Timely, and I'm like, and then they didn't do anything with it. They just kind of like turned her off, and I was like, well, that's it. I'm like, so it was little things like that where it's like there was these very underdeveloped subplots or plot points, whatever you want to call them, that I felt like detracted to it, where it was like, well, that was kind of a waste of time. Sure, it was like kind of a weird, you know, her AI kind of moment, but it's like, did this show really need that? You know, what did this show gain from having that little aspect to things, you know?
Well, they're obviously setting it up for the future, but we'll see if it ever comes to pass, because they kind of reset her at the end of the show. And I agree that her motivation was not entirely clear, because they made it seem like she was on the fritz and that she, you know, was in love with He Who Remains, right? And wanted to have a more active role. But then she betrays him immediately by telling the truth to Renslayer at the end, because as soon as he just kind of turns her off in that moment, it didn't get the sense that she, like, I would have expected that obsession to continue, right? But it just doesn't. And then she immediately betrays him, which makes the kind of whole build up to that feel hollow. And I agree, Doa. I think one of my complaints here is that, look, you only have 6 episodes and you have a lot going on. There is a lot to accomplish within these 6 episodes, with all the time traveling and all of the plot like all the plot points that you have to get through, and Loki's character development. And it really felt that, you know, there were a lot of underdeveloped characters as a result. At the end, I didn't really care about B-15 or Casey.
Yeah.
For example, like they're just kind of there, but they don't actually, they are not actually important themselves to the overall plot. Like the characters that are actually important when you look at the events that happen are Loki, Mobius, Ouroboros, Sylvie,
I guess,
and Renslayer. These are the actual 5 important characters in terms of advancement of the plot. Renslayer is important because she provides one of the central conflicts of the plot. And so
even Renslayer, though, I felt like they didn't really do much with her compared to how they were setting her up to be important.
Totally. Yeah, I totally agree that Renslayer is also underdeveloped. My point is not who is developed and who is underdeveloped, because I think Sylvie's arc is also underdeveloped. My point is that these are the actual 5 characters that drive the plot, and then Miss Minutes also. And so I wish, it felt like a lot of things got lost because there were too many character stories they were trying to tell simultaneously. And one of the hollow parts about Loki's motivation is he says, these are, I want to save my friends. But his relationship with B-15 and Casey is never really developed in any meaningful way. So it's hard to feel the emotional resonance when they are dissolving at the end. And they end up being kind of unfortunately extraneous characters. So I think they just tried to do too much in a show that they knew was going to be 6 episodes long.
Yeah, I think you can include like Hunter X5 in that too, where he was like
that didn't go
kind of
anywhere,
an
right?
antagonist for like one episode, and then it's like I don't really care about this character, but he does look like a bizarre. That actor is like a bizarre like genetic combination of John Krasinski from The Office and then Nathan Fillion from Firefly. If you put their faces into an AI combiner thing, I feel like you'd get that guy. I'm sorry,
point.
I don't remember the actor's name, but that's what I kept thinking looking at it. I'm like, wow. But I did like there was a Casey moment that I really did like, which is where they made him one of the 3 people that escaped from Alcatraz on that boat, because that's like a big mystery. If you're into American folklore, there was 3 prisoners that disappeared from Alcatraz back in like the 60s, and theoretically with a handmade boat, and they were never found. So
and one of them was taken through the time door. There's a lot of clever stuff.
The idea that happened. Yeah, I love that. And then that's a whole nother set too. You've got like the beach set, you've got all that. So, like I saw that and
crazy.
I'm like, really? That's like another set. Yeah. So they really went all out with this show, and I do think this show kind of demonstrates, what the possibilities of the MCU rather can be, and we've gotten good MCU stuff before, but I agree that this is probably the best show. This is the best Disney Plus show that we've gotten out of the MCU yet.
Yeah. Also,
I'm trying to think
as much as they didn't do a good job, I think, with the Miss Minutes character arc, shout out to Tara Strong, who they cast as Miss Minutes, who is an extremely accomplished voice actress. And she actually just slays this part, because having Miss Minutes be this kind of annoying Southern like clock the character is very recognizable and very iconic, I feel. And she really, really, really does a good job.
I know I'm working on myself.
Yeah. It's a great character. It like that. Like I said, my only complaint with it was that one kind of little side plot that just kind of seemed stuck in there. It didn't really seem like terribly well developed. I'm going back and looking through all the different MCU shows to see if I can find one that I liked more than Loki season 2. And it wasn't She-Hulk Attorney at Law.
Definitely wasn't Secret Invasion.
It wasn't Secret Invasion. Hawkeye, I liked the character, but
did you like WandaVision?
I did like WandaVision. I liked it up until basically the last couple episodes, when it turned into just another Marvel punch fight, right? I did like Falcon and the Winter Soldier somewhat. There were some episodes, I think episode 3 was just awful, but there were I forget which episode it was. There was one where I really didn't like it. And then there was it was one where one of the bad guys is just dancing in a club, and I'm like, what in the world? But I think the topics and the exploration of what the Captain America character means to different people was a great topic to explore with the show, and I thought they did a pretty good job with that. So and Captain America has always just been one of my favorite Marvel characters just for a long time. But so that was neat. But overall I would say Loki season 2 probably the best. Although there is a new Daredevil show that's going to be coming out at some point. And if you watch the old Netflix Daredevil, that was a pretty cool show too. Not a Disney Plus show, obviously, but yeah.
You liked Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. as well, I believe.
I did, but technically Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and it kills me to say this, is not considered part of the MCU. It's
fair enough.
Yeah, it was initially, and then it was kind of became its own thing. I guess it's categorized as a Marvel Heroes series. But yeah, I guess apparently, although now I feel like it can just be part of the MCU again because it could just be like an alternate timeline. But in the early seasons of Shield, they dealt with some of the things that happened in the Avengers movies, but then they sort of kind of went off. Like they have their own, the Darkhold, that that book that's central in the second Doctor Strange movie, and then it pops up at the end of WandaVision. Like that's a major MacGuffin in an entire season of Agents of Shield. And what it does and what its relationship is to the universe is totally different than what we see from that book in the other MCU stuff now that has come out later. So yeah, unfortunately that show is technically, I suppose, not canon, which is sad because it is a great show and I love the characters, and it's completely wacky and doesn't always have the greatest plots, but yeah, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is one of my favorite shows. Also the longest running Marvel show ever too. It's 7 seasons. So there you go. It's over now. Agent Coulson though, coolest character in Marvel. I'm just gonna say it.
I think that this was a really compelling show. If you guys haven't seen it, it's only 6 episodes long. I think it's worth watching. Compared to a lot of the other shows that we've seen. Would definitely recommend this, especially for the limited time commitment that you have.
You raise a great point that I didn't think about it, but they really did put a lot of stuff into 6 episodes.
Most of the episodes are only 45 minutes long too, which is crazy. It is actually very well. It's a very well paced and constructed show. It doesn't waste your time at any point.
Yeah, and you think about how little happens in other 6 episode series, and then how
nothing happened
in
Ahsoka.
This show. Well, that's a whole. We already did that podcast.
Ahsoka was 8 episodes long, and nothing fucking happened in it. So it's amazing what you can do when your writing is good.
Thrawn got a cool entry scene, so we got that. I really liked that scene, but that's Oh well. Yeah, Loki season 2 is good. I'm glad that we can have a show where we actually have kind of a positive episode about it. I feel like we're so we and not because we want to be, but I feel like we are forced to be negative and critical on the show a lot. And we've chosen to watch what we've chosen to watch, but still, I want a lot of this stuff to be good. I think that's one of the frustrations is I think we come at this stuff from wanting it to be good and knowing that it can be good. And so when it drops the ball over and over again, like, it's a bummer. It's harder. You think it's hard for you to listen to us bag on Ahsoka. It's harder for us to have to watch it.
The real pain is in our hearts.
That's right. We're the ones who are actually suffering here. You're just getting to enjoy our suffering. I hope you appreciate that.
They do. The Schadenfreude of it all, I'm sure, is part of why people watch this show. That said, this was very pleasurable, and for upcoming episodes, I think things are looking better. So I think things are looking better. So we're going to do Scavenger's Reign next, which is a show that probably many of you haven't heard of, but has been getting some really glowing reviews. It's on Max, not HBO Max, just Max now. If you guys want to check that out, it is an animated science fiction show about some people marooned from a spaceship crash. And I've been hearing really, really good things. So we're gonna go ahead and check that out next. And because we're in a desperate hunt for actually more good things to watch. And then coming out this week, actually, or in the past, it'll have just come out if you're watching this episode, is going to be what's it called? Monarch Reign of Monsters?
Monarch Legacy of Monsters, I believe
Legacy
it
of
is.
Monsters, that's
right. And that's
which is
Apple
the new
Plus, right?
Apple TV Plus show that stars Kurt Russell about Godzilla. I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, I mean, so if you've been following along with a lot of the new Godzilla-verse stuff, Kaiju-verse stuff, if you will, there hasn't been a ton of like great films, but they've all been fun. Like they've all been like a lot of fun to watch. So I kind of feel like those movies are sort of in the same category that I would put like the Fast and the Furious films in for me, where it's just like you go for the monsters, you enjoy the light plot, fun characters. You know, it's not meant to be super serious, but I'm curious what they can do with a television show, because we haven't seen a show yet in this universe. We've just seen movies. So yeah, that'll be fun. That'll be fun.
Also, in this
Hopefully.
in this show, Kurt Russell's son plays the young version of Kurt Russell, which
Yeah, I
is
saw that.
intriguing.
Yeah.
It's
I
kind of
mean-
cool. I prefer his son playing him rather than reverse aging him. I'll put it that way.
Hey, well, this would fit into, you know, our watching recently, because once this show is out, people will have already seen the Surf Ninjas episode, which stars Ernie Reyes Jr. and Ernie Reyes Sr. So another father-son duo in some great cinema, which you know now that you've probably watched that episode and then gone on YouTube and watched the only place you can find that movie, because it's not available on any other streaming platforms. But yeah, so that I am curious to see, you know, how Kurt Russell and Kurt Russell Jr., that's not his real name, he's just his son, will do in this show. That'll be fun too. Lots to look forward to.
So it is going to be on Apple TV Plus. I also am optimistic because in general, I think the quality of Apple TV Plus's shows has been really good. I know Severance was amazing on that platform, and generally they seem to do a better job of making content, right?
I've never subscribed to Apple TV Plus, but I've always been like an Android guy. So, you know, I'm not an iPhone guy. I'm a Google Android guy.
How does
so
that
maybe that's
extend
part of it.
to TV?
Because the Apple phones, Apple TV. Anyway, I've heard lots of good things for a lot of. I know Foundation is a series I think people liked as well.
Silo.
You know, so
probably shows we
so
should
I'm
be watching
excited
on
to-
this show, frankly, like
I
Foundation
guess,
and Silo.
maybe. Why are we focusing on Disney Plus so much? It's my fault. But, you know, we need to expand our horizons. I need to expand my horizons. And we need to start thinking about a Christmas episode, too, because we're less than 2 months away now.
Are
from
you
the
going to force
jolliest season.
all of us to watch the Star Wars holiday special? Is that where this is going?
There have been a lot of reviews of the Star Wars Holiday Special over the years. I acknowledge that, but we've never reviewed the Star Wars Holiday Special. And hold on, just 1 minute. Hold on. I did in the mail just receive my Life Day Chewbacca action figure. So you know, I have been thinking about the holiday special lately. So maybe we do need to do that. Maybe that's something. If you want to see us review the Star Wars Holiday Special, leave a comment in the YouTube comments. Let us know.
All right, that's it for this week, guys. We'll see you next week for a Scavenger's Wren.